This is the Out the Glass Break series, and I'm your host, David Harrison. Throughout this series, we take a candid look through the lenses of diverse corporate leaders to understand their rise through the glass ceiling and what happened immediately after the glass break. Today is something special. We're actually recording live today, and I have next to me Mr. OD Lusk, who's a senior QA analyst here at Rocket. There's been a lot of questions in the past of who are you, David? What makes you who you are? I see you interviewing other people and understanding their rise through the ceiling. What happened during your rise? What happened after glass broke for you? What did you do? So we're going to switch it up a little bit today. Instead of me driving the podcast, my buddy OD is going to drive the podcast, and he's going to take me through what I take my guests through and see can I stand up under the pressure. So with that, I will turn it over to OD. OD, introduce yourself to the audience, and it's your show.
Thank you. I'm OD Lusk, and it is a pleasure to be on your show. It's not my first time actually substituting for someone's podcast. It's always fun when you get to join someone else's show and you hear the questions that you ask people, and then you kind of start to prepare questions for this, and then you kind of try to add a little bit of your own flavor to it to kind of give people what I think is the most important thing about an individual is letting people that we work with know who you are as a person, as well as where you come from and where you're going with your vision. So a little thing different that I do, this is a little fun deck right here. And so at any point, you're free to grab from the fun deck and ask a fun deck card. And as well, I think we're open to questions coming in from the audience. So if you're out there and you're aware of what chat form we're on, or you have like a carrier pigeon or something you'd like a question to come in with, please send it in and we'll try to get that on today. So once again, ladies and gentlemen, let's get into it. And let's talk a little bit about where we're sitting here as the format right now. Two podcaster. Once you got to this point in your career, what made you decide to do this particular podcast?
That's a very good question. I've always wanted to explore and expose minority executives throughout any medium that I can, because it is viewed as we don't exist in the world. And it's an opportunity. They can't be what they can't see. I said a lot on my podcast because a lot of inner city kids in neighborhoods that are low income are not exposed to corporate leaders that look like us and talk like us. And so I wanted an opportunity and a platform to show that we do exist. It's not an anomaly that we exist. And our start and our struggles is no different than their start and struggles. So it was very important that I wanted to make sure we had an opportunity here and that is our illustrious, beautiful AC unit kicking on here at the office.
I always thought it was like an ambulance or something. I was like, okay, somebody's hurt already.
But I wanted to give them the vision, the hope, and understanding that I'm no different than you. My start was very similar to your start. My struggles are very similar to your struggles, and you can move beyond your environment.
Okay. And that brings up an interesting topic of something that I'm involved in. And of course, when you're a podcaster, you interview people, you do some research. So as we talked earlier in the green room, you're not the David Harrison that played basketball for the Indiana Pacers. But, that guy is making you look bad out here because he's not as good of a basketball player as you are. But you said something really positive. You want young kids to see people like you in executive positions. And as I was growing up, I didn't see that, and it's been a wonderful change of pace to see that. So a program that I noticed that you're part of, that I was part of as well, is called Bold Idea. And Bold Idea was a program where you bring technology to inner city youth and let them see people like you involved in technology. How did you get involved with that?
So I was actually talking to my old manager here, who actually worked at Rocket, and she was on the board of Bold Idea. And I was actually going to start a program very similar to Bold Idea. And when we both start talking about it, she said, "No, I have an actual person I want you to meet and talk to." And that's when I met the CEO of Bold Idea, and we start talking about opportunities within that and how do you further give it better reach associated with it. So that's how I got involved with Bold Idea. Great, absolutely great nonprofit for those that are watching. They're always trying to embolden and give kids in inner city the ability to understand that coding is also another way out. You don't have to be an athlete. You don't have to be an entertainer to get out. There's other methodologies that can get you out and get you exposed. The earlier you start with some of those methodologies, the better off you're going to be and the more progression you're going to make in your career faster. So they do an outstanding job of bringing that talent in. And we're talking about kids that are in middle school, so we're talking real young in the spectrum.
Yeah.
Getting them to understand coding, the power of coding, and the power of technology. And when I was a kid, I had no idea it existed.
Me neither.
I didn't understand the concepts behind it and never saw anyone in it. So what they're doing and the path they're taking is absolutely fabulous.
I like it. I like it. So let's talk a little bit about when you were a kid. Let's talk about that middle school age. Did you know that you wanted to be involved in technology at that point in middle school? You're like, you know what? This is it. I'm going technology. Or was that something that came about later on in your progression through school?
I had no idea. I wasn't exposed to technology at that stage in my life. The exposure I had were people around my neighborhood who was either civil service. I grew up very close to at the time, one of the largest Army military bases in the country, which was Fort Benning. So I saw a lot of civil service, a lot of military people was in my neighborhood. Mechanics were around my neighborhood. Teachers were in my neighborhood. So I never saw any of the technology-based individuals in my neighborhood. So, we had the standard saying, I know how to go to college, so I'm either do business or law.
Yeah.
That's all we saw on TV.
Exactly.
We saw business. I had no idea what business meant, but it was a nice buzzword, and you just threw it out there because that's what you heard all the time. And then, of course, law was one of the things we all understood because every other show when I was growing up was some kind of law show. So, they can't be what they can't see.
Yeah.
So I hadn't seen it. I wasn't exposed to it, so I didn't know anything about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's very interesting. You say growing up, not being exposed to technology is a really, really big thing that is happening now. Like you said, with the program Bold Idea, it excites me to have worked with kids and very talented kids that they didn't even realize that they were talented at this program.
Yeah.
And, I'm like, man, can I get you to come into my stand-up meeting? Because I could really use you for these things. And I think it's really positive that you got involved in the program. And it's kind of funny and ironic because when I came to Bottle Rocket, I was moved to kind of the same passion to kind of create something that would help get people like us or people like me seeing, kids like me seeing me in technology. And of course, I'm going to do it. And then you hear about this program, and I'm like, well, why reinvent the wheel? Let's just jump on board. And, it's a super positive thing about that. And so I really enjoy that. So before we take a little turn, I'm gonna grab one from the fun pile. and the fun
I'm
pile.
afraid it's fun pile. I'm not afraid what this is. So
You don't ask Miss Frizzle to substitute if you're ready for just like a normal show. So we're on. You're in this. Too late now. I should have asked, have you ever seen one of my shows before you asked me to do this? But and this is one, and I can answer this one no off the top. But did you like school as a kid?
I did. I actually loved school as a kid. It was an escape for me. And it was funny, from elementary through 7th grade, for me, it was all about school. And it gave me an escape. I grew 5 inches over the summer.
Oh, nice.
From 7th to 8th grade. And then I got into sports. Prior to that, I was a band guy. I was a trombonist. I was all city second chair trombonist.
Go Brass.
And so that was my calling at the time because I hadn't found my athletic capabilities at that time. I would trip on my own feet most of the time just walking down the stairs. So school was an escape. Back then we didn't have 24-hour cartoons on TV.
Exactly.
So there was nothing else to do. So I was really good in math and science, hated English. So it paralleled to playing music, because music constantly is all about understanding rhythm, beats, and timing, which goes right in hand with math, right? So, no, I love school. And it was an escape, and I would never want to come home.
I enjoyed school, but I mean, I just cause my friends were there. But I played trumpet, and I never thought about the timing and stuff going into math, because I didn't like math at all. Which I still find amazing that now I'm in technology dealing with math
There you
all
go.
the time. But that's the path that we take when you're heading and you have an aim to get up the ladder. So let's move a little bit into your college days. Like I said, I did a little LinkedIn research, and I noticed a really interesting path that you've taken through college. Some activities, we mentioned basketball and some other activities. You're part of a fraternity. So are we at that point now in your career in college where you realize tech is where you're supposed to be going into?
Actually, that realization happened my junior year going to senior year in high school. Again, I had no idea what I was going to college for at that time. And I've told this story before on my earlier podcast. It was called Intro to Physics at the time. And my physics teacher sat me down and was like, hey, you should be an engineer. You're really good at math and science. It comes natural to you. And I grew up in Columbus, Georgia. And in Columbus, CX Rail Lines was the big employer of a lot of people outside of the paper mill. And we were always taught engineers drove trains.
Yeah, exactly.
So
yeah.
I was absolutely upset with him. I'm like, why would you want me to drive trains for a living? No offense to the people that do that, because it's an admirable profession, but it seemed to be a knock against me, as I'm gonna pigeonhole you into this world because this is all exist in where you are.
Yeah.
And I always knew the world was bigger than Columbus, Georgia, but I didn't know how big it was at the time. And I had no idea what an engineer was at the time. And he literally sat me down, and I still remember to this day, he sat me down in the classroom, and he goes to the chalkboard and he's writing all this stuff on what an engineer does and all the different disciplines in the engineer. And from that point on, I had no other alternative but to go that direction.
Yeah.
I was intrigued because I was always tearing up stuff around the house, trying to figure out how it works. So my mom used to tell a story all the time. I should be dead because I literally wanted to understand how electricity works. I didn't understand how you can plug something in the wall and something turns on. So I literally took the plugs out, took them apart, and tried to figure out why and how this was working. I literally should have been electrocuted on site.
And you put them back in?
Yeah, I put it right back in.
with the power still on?
With the power on. They had no idea what I was playing at the time. But, I mentioned this before, but the small things you do can change the outcome of an individual that you help. Like when he sat me down many years ago and had that conversation with me, he had no idea whether or not I was going to take that path or not, and the influence that had on my life and the decisions I made from that point on. Everything decisions I made that point on was to be an engineer. I didn't know exactly what it entailed. I didn't know exactly how I was going to get there, but that had been basically my thrust and driver. Just that one conversation, someone taking an interest. And, back then, I grew up and I was in high school in the 80s.
Okay.
So I grew up in a time in a part of the country where we were seen as, and told you're never going to be anything and you're not going to amount to anything.
Yeah.
All you're going to do is work at a store and that's all you're going to be. And to have someone that didn't look like me and didn't talk like me tell me you can be more and this is what you should take a look at was kind of life-changing for me.
I can see that.
Yeah.
I can see that. Someone seeing some vision in you that you hadn't necessarily seen
And yourself.
at that point. That's very powerful. Who would you say has been the most influential person in your corporate career? at this point? I know it can change.
That's a very good question. I had a general manager when I was working at Ericsson, and it was my first time being introduced to the business side. I always was good on the technical track and understood technology and understood how you build a product and how you design things and how you operate. But I never understood how to fly the plane.
Yeah.
Right? You know, it's a different view when you're serving drinks and you're behind the door versus once you get into the cockpit and understand how to fly the plane. He opened up my mind and my thought process and my learnings around there's more to understanding this than just understanding how to build something. You must understand the financials behind what you do and how those financials affect the business by which we run. And he was, to me, from a professional standpoint, he opened my eyes to things I had no idea. Like, again, open the door to the cockpit and seeing all the switches and knobs and dials, and now understanding which levers you push, which levers you move, and which levers you never touch. And that was one of the things that propelled me in my career. He actually gave me my first C-suite opportunity. So, and I've been ever forever thankful for him, and I've been forever looking at the business side of technology versus just pure tech going forward since then.
Okay. And that's a very interesting way to look at it. A lot of us are technology people. We build, we test,
Yep.
and that business side is something that we sit in meetings and we're paying attention, and it just doesn't click for us because, you know, we're there, but it is very important for us to understand. And I think it definitely brings a broader sense of understanding business and the total business that you're being involved in. With getting that kind of knowledge, tell us about your first leadership position.
And this is a funny one. So, and I tell my team this today, all great technologists are not all great leaders.
Okay.
Yeah. You can be the best engineer in the world and be the worst leader in the world. And my first foray into leadership was I became the manager of a network engineering team. Now, back in those days, I was very aggressive. I was very brash in my demeanor. I was very upfront in my thought process. And those things don't make great leaders. Make great engineers, make great innovators, but not great leaders. And I failed miserably.
Oh.
Yeah, I failed miserably. I remember my manager at the time coming to me and said, "You should just go the architectural route."
Oh.
Yeah.
Let's talk about this differently.
You should remain an IC. You know, you're very astute when it comes to the ones and zeros. You don't handle people well, and you don't let your people do their jobs. You're constantly doing it for them.
Oh yeah.
So that was not that. That was again, failure is a part of growth. And I failed miserably. And all the people that were reporting to me were taken from under me, moved to someone else, and I went back the IC route for the next 3 years.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Ooh. So what made you decide to get back into leadership, and what did you decide to do differently the next time you got that opportunity?
I was working on a project out in Los Angeles, California, and my mentor at that time, Mr. Duncan, great guy, he started teaching me about people and understanding that in order to make it in this business, you're going to have to understand people and have to understand people where they are, not where you want them to be, but you have to meet them where they are in order to be able to connect, evolve, and become a better person. So it's supposed to have been a 6-month opportunity out in Los Angeles. It turns to 4 years. But I learned a lot, and then I picked up leadership while I was out there, and those teachings and understanding that your experience made you, it doesn't make them.
Yes.
You have to understand their experience in order to bring them forward to where you want them to go. So that's when I got back into leadership, and that's when I started climbing the ladder, if you will, a whole lot faster.
Okay. All right. So The first, and I don't always like to say that there's one glass ceiling. I feel like
Oh
you
yeah.
can get through one and there's going to be another one, because if you're an ambitious person, you always set a goal for yourself. The first time you hit a glass ceiling, a success point, a glass ceiling, and you shattered that and went through there, how did that feel? And was there anything that you wanted to change now that you were in that position?
You know, I mentioned something one of the podcasts. I suffered from imposter syndrome, and I suffered greatly from imposter syndrome. And I started equating my titles to who I was versus making who I am into the title. So the first big ceiling when I became a director, I personified myself as a director versus David driving an outcome. And everything I positioned, everything I talked about was me as that position versus me as an individual. Huge imposter syndrome I suffered through. Breaking that ceiling was the hardest ceiling I ever had to break because I had to separate the two.
Okay.
The title didn't make me, I make the title. And I can evolve that title to whatever I need it to be, make it malleable to where I want to take it. And that was hard for me because I never saw myself as something other than that little kid from Columbus, Georgia, who wasn't supposed to be anything.
Yeah.
And so that carried weight for me until my 30s.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So, and you mentioned that this was hard. It was a hard transition for you. How do you stay focused through adversity and persevere?
I stay in the now. And I try to teach anyone that wants to listen, you cannot predict what's going to happen. You cannot live in a future sense. If you're trying to live 3 weeks down the line, you're failing yourself because you're missing what's happening right now. You can't prejudge or pre-build a story in your head about something that's going to happen because you have no idea whether that's ever going to manifest itself over time. So I stay in the now. I can control about 3 to 5 minutes from where I am right now.
Yeah.
I can't control 3 hours. I can't control 5 hours from now. I control 3 to 5 minutes. So if you stay in the now and stay centered in where you are, then those anxieties, those fears, those adversities tend to go away. Because what happens from a mental state is that we're trying to live something and predict something that we have no idea about. And the brain will start building stories.
Oh, yeah.
And once the brain starts building stories, you believe those stories. And once you start believing those stories, now you're sitting 2 weeks from now and you're not here to focus on the now, and it gets you distracted. And I try not to do that.
That's powerful. I think about that. As you're saying it, I think about that kid you said from Columbus,
Yeah.
Georgia. What would you tell that kid that was told that you're only going to be able to work in a store, or believe that point? If you had a time machine, if Doc rolled up in the DeLorean on top of the AMC over there, we could go back to talk to young David at that point. What would you tell him?
I would tell him to stay focused. Throughout my career, I lost focus a lot. Because I was suffering from imposter syndrome. I didn't know who I was and who I was trying to be, so I lost focus. And when you lose focus, you lose self. When you lose self, you're just floating in the ether. So I would tell them to stay focused. I would tell them things are going to get hard for you, but you will persevere. But stay focused, stay aligned, stay in the moment. And regardless of what's said to you, regardless of what's been echoed through the chambers towards you, you can absorb and you can move as long as you stay positive and keep positive energy around you. Positive things will happen. So that's what I would tell young David.
Okay, very positive message, and I like that. I mean, I think an important part of leadership is being positive, because a lot of times we, as the people who are beneath the leaders, we don't understand that sometimes the biggest tool you have is your positive attitude. And with the technology meetings that we have, we enjoy it, and they're so much fun. Can you share with us just in your new role a little bit of what you hope your first year vision brings for this company? And then just with you, where do you see your growth after this first year?
Well, the vision I have for us is, we talked about this a little bit. We had our tech leadership meeting yesterday, which was an all-day joy for, I'm sure, the leaders dealing with me all day long. But the vision for technology is, we've adopted the Lotus plant as our mantra. And for those who don't know, the Lotus plant is the only plant that grows out of muck and mire and comes out unstained. So it grows through mud, it grows through gunk, it comes out the back end unscathed. So it's a rebirth every year for the Lotus. And for technology, the vision I want to put within our organization is that we're about to be reborn. And within that rebirth, we're going to shed some of the bad practices, shed some of the bad thoughts, and shine and come out unstained. So that's the vision I have for the technology team this year, is to come out unstained. It's going to be hard times ahead of us, but that's what the Lotus goes through.
I like it. Very beautiful flower.
Yeah.
So many things I think of, like every time you bring up the Lotus, just so many beautiful pictures. But I just want to get a little bit into kind of a personal side. So what do you like to do leisure? Like when you're not here moving us forward in great directions, what do you like to do in your leisure time?
I'm an avid smoker of meats.
That's great. Which brings me to my next question. When can we come over? Got a guru here that looks a little hungry.
No, I love cooking, and that's my getaway, is getting on the grill and creating from scratch. You know, technologists and cooks and any kind of artisan profession are very similar. All right, we come up with ideas, we try to format those ideas, and I think Ben Carpenter from our leadership team, you know, turning vapor into something solid, right?
Yeah.
How do I get that idea from vaporware into something tangible? And I do that with cooking. I do the exact same thing. I start looking at things, trying to figure out how can I make this into something better. So with something better is easy to digest. So I love cooking. I love the art of cooking because there's so many ways you can cook things, but there's only one way it comes out good.
That's true.
So
That is the truth. That is the truth. Oh man, now you got me. It is lunchtime, and all right, let's get back to these. So I was looking on LinkedIn, and there was something very interesting that popped up one of your posts about a patent that you're part of. A patent that you're part of.
Yeah.
Tell us about the emotion that you felt when you received that achievement.
That was a hard fought, and there's two more out in the wings that we're waiting to come through. But in 2018, we had started this company in early 2018, and then late 2018, you know, I left Ericsson. You know, I took the package. I said, I want to get out and run my own business and try my hand at, you know, we get a little bullish and we get a little full of ourselves. I said, well, I've made Ericsson billions of dollars. I can at least make myself 100 million.
Yeah.
Why not?
It's right there.
Why not? It's right there. Why not? So we started a company that's geared around safety and security. And we started it based on concepts that were the problems at the time, which was in schools. So we took a three-pronged approach, which is, what are the three main problems that we're seeing in schools today? And this was back in 2018. One was, and we're still seeing the problem, which is gun violence. The other one at the time was vaping. And the third one was flu.
Oh boy.
So those were the three things we set out to tackle when we launched the company. And on the flu side, we wanted to create an autonomous camera that can do an average temperature scan of everyone in the room and identify outliers of that temperature scan and bring that outlier up and send a message out to the administration that little Johnny looks abnormal. And you might want to take a look at little Johnny.
That's good.
So we literally built a camera from the bottom up, which had 2 lenses we used from a binocular sense, and then a third lens was a thermal lens. And we took the capabilities between how far you are from the camera to the pixelation calculations, and we did an AI algorithm that would correct that pixelation, which will give accurate temperature reading across the forward. Your highest temperature in your face is right here. But if you're wearing glasses, it's very hard to get that.
Yeah.
So we just built that up, tested it, wrote it up, and we got a patent for it.
Wow.
This is well before COVID. And we were hoping, tell the story today. March 8th, we signed a very large LOI for a very large school district. It was for $1.2 million. And we're like, we've done it. We're going to get ready to deploy. We had deployed a beta system in that school and had been running. March 11th, everything shut down.
Oh, no.
Everything shut down. We tried to pivot to COVID because we have another patent out there was based off particulate sensors that we're using to discover e-cigarette smoke. And we built an AI model around that could tell you whether it's flavored, whether it's tobacco, or whether it's TCH.
Oh, wow.
We can distinguish between all 3. And we wanted to pivot that to do analysis of air in the room so we can tell. We knew what size the COVID virus was. So we know we can pick it up from a size perspective. We couldn't differentiate it from anything else.
Yeah.
But we built a model that said when this particular particulate size grew, we would switch on the air in the building and we would suck the air out until that particular side went down. So, we were trying to pivot in every direction. And then around August of 2020, the wife was like, you gotta go get a real job.
That real job thing will get you with all your hopes and dreams. It's like, if there's a thing called bills.
Yeah, exactly. So that's how I ended up here. And I'm happy the decision. Beth took a chance on me. I'm happy she did. And I'm very happy to be here. And this is where I want to end my career.
Well, good. I hope you're able to retire here, and we can hang the jersey in the hallway. All the one. But I'd like to wrap up with a question that kind of takes us to where would you be if not? So if not technology, where would you be? And would you still want to be working here in the United States?
If it's not for technology, I would be in law.
Okay.
No doubt in my mind, I'd be in law. And as you guys know, I love talking, so it fits perfectly. And as my BDG members know, I love to argue, so it fits perfectly within that framework. So I would be in law. And would I be here in the U.S.? I was fortunate to work in 13 different countries for a very long time in those countries. I've always come home.
Yeah.
If I'm looking at it from where I sit today, eventually I will leave the States, but I would be in law. And when I came to Dallas, it was weird. And I'll tell you this as we close out. I had lived in roughly 12 different states.
Okay.
And this is because I was in telecom. Telecom back in the day I was a merc for hire. So if you were paying more than the person I was with, I was gone.
Yeah.
And so I moved across the country quite a bit. And when I got to Dallas, I came to Dallas because I was working for Sprint and I was living in Miami.
Okay.
And Sprint consolidated all their engineering principles to Kansas City. So, and I tell the story, I remember the day like it was yesterday. It's February the 12th. It was 85 degrees. I'm getting on the plane in Miami, getting ready they had packed up all my stuff and shipped it off to Kansas City. I didn't own a big coat in my whole life, so I never know what cold was.
Ooh.
So I had a little windbreaker in my backpack, and I got off the plane in Kansas City, and it was 12 degrees and snowing. Now, back in that day, when you got off the plane in Kansas City to get to the rental-car bus, you walked outside, you walked down the hill. So I'm walking down the hill and outside, and people are looking at me like, what is wrong with this fool? I knew then I didn't want to stay in Kansas City.
It was a wrap.
And for Sprint, I own the Southeast Network Engineering, which our platform was a company called Nortel that created that platform for us. And so I knew all the people here in Dallas that worked at Nortel, and I picked up the phone in May because it was still cold in May. And I called a good friend of mine and said, hey, you guys got an opportunity for me? 2 weeks later, I had moved to Dallas.
Yes, out of the cold.
Out of the cold. And the Texas trap is real. So once you get to Texas, you tend not to leave. So it's kind of nice here.
You got everything you want.
You got everything you need.
David's here.
So I've been here ever since. I left for 4 years to go to LA. And then from LA, I spent a year and a half in Israel and then another year in Brazil. I worked the Eastern Caribbean for a long time, but I always came back to Dallas.
That's my dad said that he's worked a couple places. He's like, there's nothing like home.
Yeah.
And I think that's with everybody, no matter where you're from, it's nothing like home. So, let's take this one on home and wrap this up. It's been a pleasure to interview you on your show, and I thank your audience for allowing me to be here. I hope they had a good time, and I hope everybody had a good time. And is there any closing words that you'd like to give the audience now that you sit on the other side of the microphone and not on this side?
I prefer the other side. No, I think that this has been great. I think this is great for the show. And you did an outstanding job.
Thank you.
You forgot to welcome me to the ride, but we'll let that go. That's one of the key stakeholders that sit in that seat. You must welcome the person to the ride.
Welcome to the ride. All right. Noted. If I ever get called back, which I didn't, welcome to the ride. I remember to start off with that one.
But no, I think it's been awesome. I appreciate the support and the liking of the show, and I appreciate everyone indulging. And as we close out Black History Month and understanding the power of the invention and the power of chaos, and what comes out of chaos is clearly light. And so with the light that we shine, we must make sure everyone can see us, because they can't be what they can't see.
I love it. And on that note, thank you all. Y'all have a great afternoon, and we'll see you back next week.
Thank you.